Hey, welcome to the Bomb Squad podcast. I'm Ethan, and with me I have.
Austin.
Brandon.
Joseph.
Tim.
And today we're going to be talking about the Daft Punk Leiji Matsumoto collaboration, Interstella 4-5, the science fiction film scored by their Discovery album. And it's pretty, with recent news of Daft Punk sort of parting ways, disbanding. Seemed particularly relevant that we talk about this film, but we all have voices. I'm actually curious. We can just go down the line. I'm approaching this more as like an anime guy and a Leiji Matsumoto guy, but I'm curious like what everyone's relationship to the film is. So I guess Austin, yeah.
Upon my most recent viewing of this film, I found it to be deeply sad. I can't seem to divorce it in my mind from Daft Punk's recent parting. But it also influenced generally my attitude towards anime because of when I saw this in my life. And it's a pretty unique looking animated film. It's got a sort of painterly aesthetic to it, and it's a really good time running at like an hour and 6 minutes. So I was happy to revisit it also because Discovery is Daft Punk's best album.
I like the way the music ties into what you see on the screen. I like the way that that you could definitely tell that the movie itself was made around the music, and I love the way some of the emotional moments hit in a lot of the works, and a lot of the when they come to Earth, the moments there. It's always stuck with me as this like really awesome emotional piece that's always been close to my heart, kind of like Pink Floyd's The Wall, only I guess less depressive.
You mentioned The Wall, Brandon. I was getting a lot of vibes watching this again. I was thinking about The Wall a little bit, and you're right. It's kind of like that, but a lot less depressing. I think it's safe to say that out of everyone here, I am the least. What's a good word for it?
Weeaboo.
Well, sure, yeah. I'm not that big into anime. It's not my thing. I tried. I just could never get into it.
Same, actually.
So for me, especially around high school and even still to this day, I'm just a huge fan of Daft Punk's music, and I honestly really love their music. That they were like a huge influence on me in high school, still are to this day, and I just kind of did some research and discovered that they had a couple of movies under their belts, and that's how I discovered this movie.
So, yeah, I would say my relationship is similar to Ethan's. I'm a big anime fan, and this was something that caught my eye, and I enjoyed it a lot. I actually was not really super big on Daft Punk until recently. Like, I didn't dislike them or anything. I just hadn't really gone into listening to them, but I just kind of recently decided to, in the spirit of their parting, decided to kind of binge their discography on Spotify. And yeah, they have a lot of really good stuff. And I think listening to their stuff really helped me appreciate the movie more upon second viewing, because I kind of picked up on some stuff like towards the end. We'll get to that later. But I recently had a friend of mine, he came across a recording of the Toonami broadcast Midnight Run Special Edition, which was a night where they played all music videos. So they opened with some of their own music videos set to their shows with music by Joe Boyd Visual. And they played a couple of music videos with that stuff. Then they played a block of Gorillaz music videos. They had a music video by an artist named Kenna. The song was called Hellbent. It was like a weird claymation thing. It was pretty neat. But the highlight of the night was really that they were playing the first 4 videos from Interstella 4-5. And this was a big deal for Toonami because it was the only time that they've done a night of music videos that didn't have any of their shows. But it was also a big deal because it was the world premiere of Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger. So that's pretty significant. So I thought it was cool to be able to watch the recording of when that actually aired and just kind of see what that looked like when that event premiered. Watching the commercials from 2001 were odd, to say the least. But I love going back into the time capsule and seeing that kind of stuff. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah, that's interesting because I still haven't seen that original broadcast because they mentioned actually in like a contemporary interview that only like 4 videos were done at the time, only a few of them. So I guess that was mid-production even that they premiered.
Yeah, that makes sense because I mean, yeah, they only showed those 4.
Yeah, and then the later premiere for everything else. That's really interesting actually. For me, and yeah, and seeing it in that context of being a Toonami a premiere event, that's always interesting. It being there that much pomp and circumstance for something, especially
Right.
when anime was first really catching into the mainstream. I think for me, I approach this primarily as someone who used to who grew up watching a lot of Leiji Matsumoto stuff more than anything. I watched the Galaxy Express 39 films as a kid, and I was a big Star Blazers fan growing up. And eventually I would watch Space Battleship Yamato and that sort of thing. So and Captain Harlock, of course, both Space Pirate and Arcadia of my youth. So of course I walked into it with some level of familiarity with his work, and I do like Daft Punk, especially their first couple albums, Discovery and Homework, and I really, and even their later stuff, of course, I like Ram and Human After All, but Discovery I think probably stands as my favorite. So it was a great blend, but I really like the approach because it feels very much like a Matsumoto story. Like you guys were saying, like Brandon and Austin especially were emphasizing, was it's a very emotional sort of film. It's about conquering things, and there are times when it doesn't quite make sense, and it's this semi mystical thing that also positions itself in a science fiction context, which is it's extremely Matsumoto. If you're familiar with any of his work, so it definitely, like, despite it not being based really on any previous Matsumoto piece, it feels like a Matsumoto work, even more so than like a lot of the stuff that was, because there were a lot of adaptations of his work in the 90s and early 2000s. There was sort of a renaissance, but a lot of it is of pretty mixed quality. I would say it sort of stands out. And then the animation visuals, like despite being early digital animation, it looks very impressive. But we'll get into that, this sort of weird, interesting film moving forward. This mainly just came about because the album was finished. It wasn't made in conjunction with the animation. It was, the album was finished, and then they wanted to make an animated film to go along with it, and everything was sort of set to that. Is there anything in particular you guys wanted to talk about production wise that caught your eye, or just about the development of the film?
I have a bone to pick with the general state of this release, because having seen this since I was very young, and getting to see lots of things I never dreamed that I would see, especially in higher resolution. I feel like if we could get the alternate ending of Frank Oz's Little Shop of Horrors, that used to be just a DVD extra that, fun fact, got leaked out on a DVD and wasn't supposed to. I think that Little Shop of Horrors was the first DVD to be recalled in America because somebody from, I think, Warner Brothers, somebody put out the version with the alternate ending on it, this little low-res, interlaced version of it in black and white with unfinished effects. And over the course of my lifetime, we were able to get that in 1080p, in color, with some of the effects done. And yet, this thing that I saw plastered all over my childhood, on TV, I've seen these music videos my whole life. And the best thing that we have to work with right now is a Blu-ray that I don't even think was released in this region in America.
Mm-mm.
And it's an upscaled port of the DVD release. You frequently find people online telling you to just buy the DVD instead of the Blu-ray, although the Blu-ray does have really good Dolby 5.1 sound. And that is just something I cannot believe happened, considering Toei did this. I would like to see this remastered someday. Because going back to watch it, my only complaint was there were a lot of shots where you got very clear definition on what you were looking at, but then every time that it would pan around, like anytime they'd use like digital techniques or camera techniques to zoom around, anything that would get messed up by interlacing, it just looks like garbage.
Yeah, it looks very muddy, particularly on those pans. There's some weird aliasing issues on the line art. And you say that, but I extremely believe that Toei put this out because that's super on brand for them. They do that a lot where, like, I remember Horus, Prince of the Sun. It's on Blu-ray over here, but it was just an upscale job. For years, you couldn't get like their golden age films in any high quality. I think it was this for years. It was only a terrible DVD of Little Prince and the Eight-Headed Dragon. They just put out a Blu-ray last year, I want to say, last February, February 2020, and it's one of their iconic. And before that, it was just a useless, just pug ugly DVD copy of it. And they always have weird stuff when importing works. Like I know our versions of Sailor Moon are of inferior quality to the Japanese because a lot of it is like they don't want people reverse importing things. But hopefully with them doing those Blu-rays of like their golden age stuff, and with there's being a bit more interest in Daft Punk now, especially, we might be able to see something come out of it. Their hand might be pushed, and they might be like, hey, we could make enough money if we actually bothered.
Yeah, I mean, Toei has definitely done that before. Like, I have a friend who, anytime any release of DBZ comes out, he's just like examining it under a microscope, and he's like, nope, it's a little bit too cropped. It's got some smudgy. It's not good. Yeah, I noticed. I had not watched Sailor Moon until recently, but like whenever I'm watching it on Hulu, I noticed the coloring is a little odd, and I guess that might be what's going on there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's purely the masters that they were Viz were provided. There are lots of comparisons to the Japanese release and other international releases. Like the Italian release is generally considered one of the best, I believe.
Hopefully they do a good Blu-ray release of Interstella 4.5 in the not too distant future. Discotech, we promoted you before. Now we ask you for a favor. Release this movie.
Please, if you can manage, if you can get it from Toei, because I know that's no, nothing against Toei. They've just always been a bit strange about rights stuff.
There was a period in the past where Toei didn't even acknowledge this movie on their website.
Yeah, stuff like that. They've always been weirdly restrictive about things, and I've never quite gotten it. But it's their prerogative. It's their company, whatever. But getting out of release stuff, I mean, that is a fair point because it does affect your viewing experience, particularly with early digital stuff. But I think Interstella is this really compelling science fiction film. When you get down to the larger narrative of it, it's not particularly like there's not too much depth there. It's not the most complex sort of narrative, but it works to emotional ends more than anything. Like it feels correct, which is what's most important.
Yeah, and that's what it needs.
Yeah. And for those who like aren't super familiar with it or that sort of thing, just like a quick rundown of it it's about 4 members of an extraterrestrial pop group that are kidnapped by the evil Earl de Darkwood, and they're taken back to Earth where they're brainwashed and made into pop singers until they're rescued by Shep, the heroic space officer. Your Captain Harlock, your Susamu Kodai, your insert name of guy that looks like that from X Leiji Matsumoto property, and until he's fatally wounded, and it's up to the rest of the band to defeat the evil Earl de Darkwood and make it back home. That's basically the plot in a nutshell. But of course, it's all scored by Daft Punk music, specifically their Discovery album, and there's no dialogue throughout, which is what makes it really compelling. It makes it a very universal sort of film. You don't need any subtitles or anything to understand what's going on. But I'm curious, what are your guys' thoughts on the film itself now that we've kind of run down the plot real quick, or if you have any commentary on the narrative and your opinion, your feelings of it, or any individual moments?
If there's this Earl with this money to travel between dimensions, and he's got enough technology and enough money to do that, why is he trying to get a space beaver?
Okay, I guess that's a big plot point, is they're trying to get a bunch of golden records to stick in this giant machine that'll presumably do some evil that'll cast the world into darkness or destroy the planet or whatever. XYZ. I don't know why specifically gold records, because like again, it's something that, you know, like if you think about it for 10 seconds, it's like that's kind of goofy, but that's again kind of on brand for Matsumoto. There's a lot of stuff that in his works that are silly, but I appreciate that the work itself doesn't treat it as silly. So that's really the, like, he's a part of an evil cult. Yeah, it's that weird the mystical angle that sort of crops up in this. The way he turns into energy is sort of reminiscent of like Queen Prometheum from the Galaxy Express 39, and her planet body, how it plays with mystical energies coexisting in this science, like, and it's a pure sidebar, like it kind of comes out of nowhere almost, but it works again. I like it. It adds flavor to the piece.
One thing that I heard a couple of people note, mind you, I am not that familiar with Leiji Matsumoto, except for all that I've managed to absorb through osmosis by being around you for the past month or so. One thing that you can put together after viewing this film enough times is sort of all of the characters in it are written from a standpoint that people are inherently good. Everybody's trying to, like say for instance, the villain of this film, the Earl de Darkwood. He is trying to control the universe by accumulating 5,555 gold records. And the source of that need for control is because his parents were killed in a chaotic way, like a meteor smashing into his house. There are external factors that lead people to doing wrong in this movie, but everybody always wants to sort of try to do something, these varying degrees of noble stuff. Like, you know, they've got the noble sacrifice of Shep, and even when Earl de Darkwood is defeated and he's about to fall into a pit to his demise, Arpeggius tries to grab him and save him, and doesn't even really try to let go, he just loses his grip. And that's one thing that adds to the music video fun of this, is that underneath all the events of the film, I think there's an artist who inherently views people as good. And that sort of fits in with the, you know, music videos are a party. It's a fun universe that you're dwelling in. And even if at its deepest, it still makes, you know, of the binary assumption of whether we're good or evil, it still leans in the direction of us being kind towards each other.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a thing in a number of Matsumoto works. There is a sense that people are sort of a product of systems and that sort of thing. Particularly like Galaxy Express 39, it's not very subtle in its themes of an aristocracy and, you know, people being born into wealth and that sort of giving them a certain distance and a lack of humanity. It's literalized in the aristocracy literally making themselves robots. Machine men, in that case. And, you know, he's not terribly subtle about those themes, but there is, you know, a reason for why people end up the way they do.
When the world, it's funny because it is the whole world, when the world finds out that the Crescendals have been kidnapped from their planet and need to get back home, when the world finds out they're blue because they're not where they're supposed to be, the entire world and all of its scientists and its world leaders stop everything to get them back home. That's another example of just, this is a very optimistic view on humanity taking place in here. It's an optimistic sci-fi, and that's not something that you always run into, especially these days as the actual world gets more dystopian. So it's, you know, fun to take a trip back to 2003. And another thing, it's sort of got that It Follows thing going on, where I'm not sure the aesthetic portrayed in the movie is supposed to be slightly modern times for back in 2003, but with a lot of stuff taken from decades prior, because this was based on a cartoon or cartoons that Daft Punk had seen growing up, particularly made by Leiji Matsumoto.
Yeah, the aesthetics of the film in general are very, very Matsumoto, in the sense of there's a lot of dials, there's a lot of no, I mean, you know, not just stuff contemporary to like the fashion and stuff. You see that certainly, but the way mechanics, the science fiction of it is very sort of old fashioned, like the Coke bottle sort of sides on the space helmets you see, and just the design work, the way he does those like radar displays on every, just coating the walls of everything. That's a very Matsumoto sort of design, and because he was so influential on other artists, you very much see how that sort of perpetuated itself, and then it makes it feel at times maybe older than it really is, or nostalgic, or really just unstuck in time in a way that it just all sort of melds together, which I think works. There's always a sense, in Matsumoto's work particularly, that time scales aren't important. Continuity, like there's a universe sort of connecting his works, arguably, like the Leiji verse, quote unquote, but it's always so loose, and he has just so little care for how it actually fits together. Just this ambivalence to it that I think it fits in the context of a Matsumoto work. Like, for all we know, this could take place in the same world as Captain Harlock or whatever, and it would work fine with his really arbitrary rule set. I mean, I think it works with a music video when you're in a format, when you're being so loose with it. Adds to the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think the film as a whole is a lot of fun. It's sort of a nice little experimental anthology kind of thing. Like they were talking about The Wall earlier, which I know there are more than just those two films that are like music video feature length film things, but like I think it's a cool idea, and I think it's approached really well here because it's like a feature length narrative that just flows through all of the songs. And that's something that I think is kind of cool. And like Austin was talking about the whole optimistic aspect of it, which really plays into the ending.
There's a lot to it, and I think that's the one thing that stinks about this movie, and it's almost kind of hard to talk about at times, particularly the narrative of it, because there's not like plot points that you can ruminate on. Like I guess there's the stuff with like Earl the Darkwood, but again, it's overall a pretty straightforward sort of film. Just moves from thing to thing. The transitions between songs I think was really well handled. Is one thing I will note. The way it just shifts between montage and the mood of each track rather. The only one that stands out is maybe not super fitting the scene it's in is maybe Verdi Quo, because it seems like it's sort of low and ambient for a climactic sequence. But a lot of it, like the shit, especially those first four, like the ones that they showed on Toonami, the transition between One More Time and Aerodynamic is really, really good. And of course, the harder, better, faster, stronger. That sequence is probably the most iconic from the film, probably because of association with the song, but still, I think just the visuals of it, of them being brainwashed and made into humans, is something that sort of can stand on its own in its own way. And there are a few like that. Yeah,
I think I would say the aerodynamic sequence is probably my favorite, because like you're opening with this big concert and like everybody's having a good time, and then it's like, oh shit, it's the cops, we gotta run.
Yeah, exactly. You get I think the transition, it's a pretty hard cut. It lulls you in with a really good song in the form of One More Time, and it pretty immediate. It does a good job of establishing sort of the state of things as they are before transitioning into Aerodynamic, which I think is important for this narrative.
I've been thinking about the end of the movie and how at the very end it's just some kid asleep.
The whole movie was basically a dream.
Yeah, and that's got me thinking.
He's just sleeping and listening to his Daft Punk albums.
Yeah. Doesn't that make you think? Was Earl the Darkwood ever even there?
Super Smash Bros. Logic.
It's Super Smash Brothers, yeah.
That was what I was kind of talking about with Austin bringing up how there's this belief in the film that people are inherently good, and I think that really plays well when we find out that the whole narrative is just through the perspective of a child having a dream with his toys and his Daft Punk album.
Yeah.
In a way, like it really fits the theme of Daft Punk because they grew up watching Captain Harlock. Like they mentioned in interviews, how one of their favorites was Captain Harlock, or Albator, as they would have watched it. Likely, I think that sort of ties it together. In that the child is Daft Punk in a way.
One of the things that I actually really like about it is there's not a single ounce of dialogue in it. Nothing is really explained, and it's all just done like visually. The story is told visually. And they managed to do it in a way that it's just like perfectly like streamlined. It's very easy to follow. Like even with all the absolute insane cartoonish animated stuff like going on. You get what's happening in it. Which for a movie that's sweet. But yeah, for a movie that's going to go silent, like clarity is absolutely important. And I think that this movie really does it really well. Visually, I mean, it's a feast for the eyes. It's really, well, when it has to be, of course, it's like really bright, really colorful, which honestly kind of, it really helps capture the feeling of the music, the use of colors in the animation. It's like very vibrant. It honestly just makes me feel good. I basically just kind of described this to a girl on Tinder before watching the movie. The movie's a bop and a half, man. It's fun. It's got fun sci-fi elements to it. Of course, the soundtrack's great because it's Discovery, which we were talking about this like right around the time that Daft Punk broke up, and I said at the time that I think Random Access Memories was my favorite Daft Punk album. I gotta change that. It's Discovery. Discovery's too freaking good.
Mm-hmm.
Having the visuals to it.
Been saying that for years.
Having the visuals to it just kind of also just really reminded me, just my God, this music is so good. Particularly with that opening, which is probably the closest I'm ever going to get to experiencing a Daft Punk concert. Because goddamn, did that concert look fun?
We're gonna celebrate.
Yeah, and I think that's pretty natural transition too. To talking about the film's visuals, in that it feels like a Toei joint. I'll give it that. In that it's economic, certainly. Like it does look very pretty. Like the drawing, like I particularly like the use of thick outlines, and there's a lot of really dynamic stuff done with cinematography in terms of angles. But there's a certain economy, like they reuse a lot of animations from while panning. Particularly, I noticed in the opening concert sequence, you see Beryl just smiling and slapping on his drum kit on his drum set in the exact same way, like 5 or 6 times. They just recycle the animation. I think they mirror it at one point, but they just move them a little bit in different. It's not a problem, but it is that sort of Toei thing where there's a certain economy, particularly with how many moving figures there are in the frame a lot of the time, particularly during those concert sequences, how every individual character is animated. Again, there's some early digital jank in there too, with like the movement of the spaceships. I notice in particular the way they pan across the screen. It feels a little unnatural, even compared to how similar pan effects were done in traditional animation, like cell animation back in the day, because things weren't quite right. The scaling algorithm didn't work exactly how they wanted, or just there were a few sequences where I kind of think that they went a little overboard almost. Like they want to have every like they have the reflection of the manor in the van when they're doing a Scooby-Doo bit going up to the Earl's manor, the Manor to Darkwood or whatever, in the Mystery Machine.
So I wasn't the only one getting Scooby-Doo vibes from that sequence.
Yeah, I kind of loved it with Cowardly Beryl, just kind of, or he just sort of just trips all over himself. There's a few sequences where like the way they do the lighting effects, it's just a bit almost overbearing, and it feels, well, not overbearing, but kind of just a bit much, or a bit kind of cheapo. But those are very, very few and far between, and it's probably just because I've seen this movie a lot that I even noticed them quite so much. Obviously, the few flaws are going to stand out, and overall, I think it is a very, very attractive film, and they do a lot of stuff to cover up any budgetary deficiencies, and they do a lot of interesting cinematography stuff that people appreciate from animation. But I'm curious about like what you guys like, what some of you as who maybe aren't as tuned into animation stuff, what you guys think of it, because I could be a blowhard about it.
See, I like the fact that I don't know much anime because I don't watch much anime, but I know because I had an older brother, right, that I know what classic or retro anime, I guess is what I'd call it, looks like, and it totally has that vibe to it, and I love the way that it looks because it looks like this retro anime, right? And I think that actually augments the music in my eyes.
Yeah, because because the sound of the piece is it's inspired by a lot of disco stuff, like about a lot of old French disco and that sort of thing. Because house music is that sort of natural evolution. So I think it definitely jives with it. It feels contemporaneous to the sound on display.
The line work isn't particularly detailed. There's a part of me that's deeply suspicious that the reason it's been 18 years and we still don't have a solid Blu-ray of this, not made using AI, is because somebody at the fucking production company thought, well, gee, this is going to be broadcast on MTV and Cartoon Network and in bowling alleys. So we're going to, make some irreversible decisions in the pipeline right now. Because knowing early enough digital trickery to do, compositing elements together inside of whatever, maybe a Silicon graphics machine they were using, some of it I was very, very suspicious of how they achieved certain camera moves and such, and zooms. I was hoping just like, please tell me that you did this with like high resolution hand painted elements, or that this wasn't some goofy little lens flare generated on some antiquated software, because it's sometimes had that look to it. I think that they really like if there was something that got its back broken during production, it was the colors, because boy, are the colors in this doing a lot of heavy lifting.
Mm-hmm.
Character designs from Matsumoto are really fun for somebody who knows this as the Daft Punk movie and not as a thing in Matsumoto's lengthy career. I can't be the only person who had a crush on Stella as a child. Generally, I don't actually hate the way this looks, aside from like some very general like resolution issues. I think all of it works together, or maybe that I've been distracted by the music. Other than, like I said in the beginning, the line work isn't particularly detailed.
Yeah, and I think that varies from scene to scene with the line art. Particularly, there are a few where it's not so great. I think that's an interesting take about the colors too, because I always that always stands out to me is how relative, like, honestly, this one's really impressive, but like early digital coloring tends to be more limited in the spectra, and there's like a lot of I noticed it might have just been the video quality too, the banding you get on some of the light sources and stuff in it. I'm sure that was probably more of a video quality thing, but a lot of the color in early digital animation is pretty limited, and that's always been something that stands out to me watching it. But what is neat about Interstella is that issue doesn't crop up nearly as much as it does in a lot of contemporary digitally animated Matsumoto stuff. It doesn't, like Gun Frontier or what was the other one? Super Submarine 99, stuff like that, or Galaxy Railways. That's the other big one. The digital animation looks pretty darn good for the day. And particularly with regards to color spectra, I think what's interesting about the line art, though, is not just that I do admit some like what you were saying is that it can be a little bit minimalist. The varying line weights in it, particularly on the outlines, like the way they aren't really consistently thick or consistently thin. I think that adds a lot of character to it. Going into minutia again, but I think that it captures a feeling, because a lot of his manga had that quality, and you really couldn't get that back in the day quite so much when you were doing cell animation, when your inkers and painters were doing things traditionally, or you were doing things on paper and you needed to preserve the line weight, because if it moved too much, it would look weird in motion. But here it's, that effect of his manga works is preserved very, very well, which I appreciate in its own way, even someone who's not a huge stickler for retention of the manga's original style.
I hope that we can get a nice, big, crazy remastered, maybe just, 1080 or hopefully 4K release of this, because I think that people around our age, a lot of people are susceptible to that. We saw it on Toonami. We saw it as a child back when anime was just getting big and everyone was watching Dragon Ball Z. And I have sort of a bias towards liking this film a lot. I have strong emotions wrapped up in this because it's just such an early cartoon that came up in my life, and it really influenced how much I like cartoons, what kind of cartoons I like. Hell, it influenced the people I dated over the years. So I know that there are going to be people not too much younger than us who probably didn't grow up with this, except for, say, like maybe seeing it as a Daft Punk music video, because, I don't think Warner made any other music videos for any of these songs.
No.
And they're going to be, a little bit less keen on it because they don't have all the backstory. And I do have confidence that if you give it a decent remaster, future generations will grow to like it without needing to be MK Ultra into liking it.
I mean, when I first watched it and Shep died, I bawled my eyes out.
That's a Matsumoto thing, right? The heroic sacrifice, that noble stuff. Does that pop up a lot in his works?
Yes, actually, quite frequently. You see a lot of that stuff, like the first episode of Space Battleship Yamato. Susamu Kodai's older brother sacrifices himself in one of the last space cruisers. He goes to attack the enemy to give enough time for Captain Okita to flee. At the end of every Galaxy Express movie, there's a big sacrifice. You always get that noble sacrifice in Harlock, dealio. The idea of giving oneself up for the greater good is a common theme in a lot of his works. So it fits pretty readily in where Shep sort of gives himself up, because he is depicted as almost kind of older with his thicker eyebrows than the other equivalent, Arpeggius, who's sort of more standard young. Like, obviously they're not as richly characterized as characters from a television series or a longer running manga, but he has sort of an older quality to him in his design work. And usually those are the guys who will end up giving themselves up for the greater good in Matsumoto works.
Two things throughout the movie that stick out as kind of like, say you're on LSD and you're looking at this, you feel like you're inside the creator's brain, are sort of the notion that Shep is a saint and Stella is always in some sort of danger. Because even at like an hour 6 runtime, the amount of times they manage to make Shep look like this noble hero who can save the day with his selflessness, and the amount of times they make it all about Stella being in danger, that was one of those things where it was like, oh, I've met you and I know all about you, Mr. Matsumoto, just because of the amount of times they pushed on that button.
That's a weird thing. It crops up sometimes, but usually the woman in a lot of Matsumoto works is a mother figure for groups. Like literally in Galaxy Express 39, there's a character named Maytel, but her name is sort of a mistranslation because, I mean, it's kind of funny now due to the Cars films, but Meiteru would be a more accurate translation, or Mater. Because it was supposed to be a transliteration of the English word mother, but instead they went with Maytel for most translations. Like even the old New World Pictures translation that Roger Corman did of that film goes with Maytel, and then every succeeding one sort of stuck with that. But Stella is not. Stella is more of a damsel than even the likes of say Nova or Yuki from Space Battleship Yamato, or the Millennial Queen in Queen Millennia. He has, like, his women characters aren't necessarily incredibly strong all the time, but they're usually this is the most damsel-y I've really seen them in one of his works, except maybe Arcadia of My Youth, that sort of thing. But even then, they're a bit stronger, which is an interesting quality about this film.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me of when I was editing a music video with Fleischer Superman footage, and like halfway into the video, I noticed, okay, Superman has rescued Lois Lane 3 times and we're 2 minutes in. I need to get some different footage. All right, there's a volcano. That's cool.
What happened was Matsumoto pointed to that early mock-up art of Stella with the blue skin and the blonde hair and said, "Trust me, I've drawn this woman 10,000 times, and this is the one that's gonna sell. I know this because my wife made Japanese Barbie."
Jesus. Yeah, that's accurate. Stella, yeah, what's interesting too is Stella's like the blue skin thing. That's actually going back to Space Battleship Yamato. Is the aliens in that were all blue skinned, frequently blonde haired characters. The Gamelos, or the Gamelons, if you're a Star Blazers fan like I am. Which I never knew if that was intentional or not. I don't think Star Blazers and Yamato were super huge in France. And I checked, I poked around to make sure. But I haven't seen anything saying that was the case. But I think it's just an interesting quirk. I like to imagine it's an intentional thing, because there are a couple little homages. Well, at least one I know for sure, because there's I swear there's a drummer who's supposed to be Deathlock, or Dessler, rather, from Yamato. And there's when Beryl is tracking Stella, he's wearing Harlock. Harlock's like jacket, basically his cape and a little ensemble, which I thought was a cute thing, especially since his design is sort of borrowed from the way Matsumoto draws his potato people, which is what they're always called. And he's very reminiscent of like Tochiro, or particularly Tetsuro, Tochiro and Tetsuro from the Galaxy Express 39, or the young protagonist from Queen Millennia, who looks exactly like Tetsuro, basically. And there are a few. That's the difficulty with Matsumoto. It's hard to tell if he's trying to homage a particular character, if he's just going back to one of his old favorite designs. He does sort of. It's less pronounced than, say, Osamu Tezuka's, because he uses what is called sort of a star system, where he repeats designs intentionally. Like the idea is that they are actors who are being recast in a different role. It's a little bit because he's a bit more hodgy-podgy. He has a smaller cast of characters playing different roles, or characters that look pretty similar playing different roles, that sort of thing. It's always been a bit less distinct than Tezuka's star system, where all the characters you can tell at a glance who's who, which actor they are, really. But I still think it's fun to sort of pick out. It's a treat for fans of his work in particular to catch those few things, but because it's not super fan servicey overall in terms of showing off little things from different ones. I think you see one of the outfits when that's cycling through those for Beryl. It's Tochiro's from the Arcadia of My Youth series, Endless Orbit SSX. But that's the only one that really comes to mind, and that's an obscure one. That's a reference to a canceled series.
Wow.
That it only made several episodes in, but by that point, SSX was sort of old hat. That's where my profile picture comes from on most on Twitter, I think, right now. That's actually where my name comes from on most social media platforms. Sundown McMoon is a reference to Tochiro's name in the god-awful New World Pictures dub of the Galaxy Express 39.
And you're Sundown McMoon.
That hat, where'd you get it?
Which is very funny. It is an absolutely hilarious dub. Captain Harlock is dubbed as Captain Warlock, and he talks like John Wayne Pilgrim.
Remember, I don't want him hurt. He must be returned to Earth safe. Someday we'll meet again, somewhere beyond the vast sea of stars.
Rules so hard. Tetsuro is named Joey Hanabana Kananda Banda Smith.
Who are you, kid? Stop calling me kid. I happen to have a name. It's Joey Hanakana Baba Kananda Smith.
Like, he just goes on and on. It's like 10 syllables long. That dub is a treasure. And that's actually a thing I wanted to get into. I think part of the reason Leiji Matsumoto worked so well is because people around the world recognize his work. Like, even in America and that sort of thing, people are probably most countries his work has made it to. Like, all of his major works in some capacity have been released in English, even if it's in like a limited capacity or like one episode or as a pilot sort of thing. Like, in America, if you enjoyed anime, there was a high chance that you would watch a Matsumoto work. The problem was his work was never presented in a particularly accurate way for years. Back in the day, in 78, actually, they brought over Space Pirate Captain Harlock in Japanese with English subtitles on television when it was broadcast on a UHF station out of Hawaii, and then distributed to a few local like Asian networks, quote unquote, stuff targeting usually a Japanese audience. I think Chicago might have gotten it at some point, but I know New York and San Francisco definitely did. No, but that's such an interesting. But like what Daft Punk were saying when they were being interviewed was, they grew up with stuff like the Galaxy Express 39 and Captain Harlock, and Matsumoto's work in general has been distributed just around the world. There is a universal capacity to his work that even other Japanese animation doesn't seem to have. Even if America was honestly pretty late to the party on Japanese animation, like, we still got a lot of his stuff, even contemporaneously, which is why I really do think they kind of made the perfect decision, because even oldsters who maybe weren't super familiar with anime could see Interstella and be like, hey, that looks like Star Blazers, or hey, that looks like Space Coteers or Danguard Ace if you're a particularly geeky oldster living on the West Coast. That sort of thing where they would recognize the design work and all that, or like they would have seen Captain Harlock on television under the Harmony Gold dub, the Queen of 1,000 Years, or more likely they would have seen the Vengeance of a Space Pirate tape as a kid, or that sort of thing. There were a lot of venues they could have been exposed to his work in some capacity. And then, of course, that Daft Punk as a very modern sort of band at the time, even with their older fashioned influences, they were sort of very, very popular with the youths, or so I've been told. They attract this newer audience and sort of bring it into contact with Matsumoto's work. So I think there's a really good symbiotic relationship between this film and the album it's ostensibly promoting, and introducing them to older work and introducing fans to older work to newer material.
It was, Daft Punk was quite a hot band back in the day. I think they're one of the few outfits that appeared within my short lifetime thus far that people will call legendary if you ask them. And it's a fantastic thing that they brought Matsumoto to new audiences and gave us this, wonderful collection of music videos made into a movie. Yeah, they were such a big deal ever since shortly after I was born. It's really bizarre rewatching this now, knowing that the epilogue has come out and that the two members have parted ways. And I can't believe it's such a strange thing going back and watching their best movie made out of their best album, because it begins with One More Time and there won't be another. Plus, the movie is Interstella 4/5, 4 5s in sequence, and Daft Punk didn't even release 5 studio albums. Something about this just feels sad.
Christ, you're making me feel depressed, Austin.
I remember the first time I ever saw anything from this movie. There used to be this bowling place by my house called Brunswick Zone. They're technically still Brunswick Zone, but they've been renamed to Bolero because of some hipster shit that happened in 2014.
Mm-hmm.
And they had this event called Cosmic Bowling, where after a certain hour, they would turn off most of their lights and only turn on black lights. And the whole place had all of this stuff that would light up under these black lights, sometimes including the bowling balls. And they would pull down these TVs, and I couldn't find the company that did this for them, but play the same loop of music videos for several hours. And they would play the 2 music videos, the One More Time and then directly after Aerodynamic. And the first time I saw this, I thought that it was an actual cartoon I could go find. Like a series that I was going to watch. And it was so transfixing. I remember it caught my eye and it distinctively captured my imagination so much. And I went home and I tried to figure out more ways that I could listen to One More Time over and over again. And it was such a big deal. I have this computer scientist, local guy, his name's Justin Dieters, and I would torture him for years, because whenever he'd bring up Daft Punk, any of the names of their albums, I'd lean in and be like, is that the one with Aerodynamic on it? Regardless if he was discussing Discovery. I have a long history with this album, and specifically, not watching this movie. I suppose the music videos from this movie have been plastered throughout my life at parties and any time that somebody wants to put on something from Discovery. And I'm happy that they had this stage in their career where they made it, because I was not as big of a fan of Human After All or Random Access Memories. This is sort of golden era Daft Punk for me, and Daft Punk is now this came and went legendary band, and I'm happy that they did music videos with Spike Jonze and other huge directors, but this is sort of the piece of Daft Punk visual content in my mind.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that sentiment, at least, because I do like a lot of their other music videos. There's that one for a track off Homework that's quite good and that sort of thing. There are good Daft Punk music videos, but I think the stuff from Interstella so thoroughly eclipses basically everything else. The director of this movie is Kazuhisa Takenouchi, and he's just sort of a Toei lifer. He mostly does episode direction, and he did a handful of their movies, like directing like Dragon Ball movies, like not proper, quote unquote, proper features, like a Dragon Ball film, that sort of thing, a One Piece film. But he also directed the hit OVA Vampire Wars. Vampire Wars is a terrible OVA. It's not good at all.
Wait, it's OVA? You don't say OVA? I thought it was OVA.
No, you don't say that. That's a different thing.
Uh-oh.
You can call it OVA if he wants.
That's fair. I have a buddy who insists on calling it an OAV still, because they used to be interchangeable, but now OAV means something very different.
What's OVA mean?
OVA means original video animation. OAV used to mean original animated video. Now it means original adult video.
Oh.
Oof.
And I don't know why. Yeah, but no, his other big, this director's other big credit is a stinky, not very good, hyper-violent sort of original video deal with a really great piece of cover art by the late great Noriyoshi Orai. I'm digging deep here, gang. That's about all I got on the production. There's a lot of good, Toei animators who worked on it. A lot of the standard workhorse animators, but there's no one in particular that really stands out outside of obviously the central collaborators here, Leiji Matsumoto and Daft Punk. It very much feels like they guided this picture more than the director or anybody else really. And I don't think it would be nearly as good. Like it's hard to imagine this film being scored by anything other than Daft Punk music, because I think it would be much lesser for it, despite my affection for it. And it's very simplistic narrative, that sort of thing, or straightforward sort of narrative, not simplistic. It would not be very good without Daft Punk. It would be all right, but I probably wouldn't have rewatched it, kind of thing.
It's sort of a mind-blowing, like a huge task to make a coherent movie to the album Discovery, because Discovery varies so greatly between songs. It harkens back to totally different genres of music. You've got like hard rock and this like disco shit all existing on the same album. It's like if you were to try to make a animated movie out of like Fetch the Bolt Cutters or To Pimp a Butterfly. It's a daunting task, and yet every scene, the visuals feel like they perfectly match up with the music, except I suppose maybe in your opinion Verdi Quo, which I don't share that opinion. I think Verdi Quo is just this like wicked lengthy odyssey where everything's going crazy, even though I guess it is more of an ambient track.
It's just because that particular sequence is trying to convey a lot of information to the viewer.
I really like that song a lot.
I like it. Oh, I do like it a lot. I'm just talking about more how it complements the footage. And I don't know, maybe it's one of those things where I may, if I rewatch it, I may feel completely different. Who knows? And I don't think it's bad, to be clear. I think it's just probably of them the least fitting, if that makes sense.
There's a vaguely spoken of connection. This is referenced in a lot of sort of production write-ups about this movie, where when they went to Matsumoto, who made Albator when they were children, they were surprised that they got along so well, because this is this legendary figure, this man whose like work is really prolific and like a big person over in Japan, and they didn't know if they'd be able to get him to do the movie with them. And a lot of people write about how Matsumoto had really enjoyed French cinema and how that was their sort of way of bridging the gap. I found one particular source in a magazine that mentioned a specific movie that he brought up. In case anybody's curious, when Matsumoto was in a slump one time, he went and he watched Marianne de ma Chaussée, Marianne of My Youth, the 1954 movie that was directed by Julien Duvivier. And so apparently, that was Matsumoto's fucking joint. That was his Breathless, in case anybody wants to, ever see if they can cure themselves out of a slump the same way Matsumoto did, if they're trying to draw manga, I guess.
Yeah, no, Marianne of My Youth, the lead actress in that film, who's actually a German woman, was the inspiration for all of his female, I guess really all of his female character designs. Marianne Hold.
What? That random Franco-German co-production was what influenced these women?
Yeah, Marion Hold. You notice it. I think it's mostly in the nose. Her nose is a little bit longer, and the way the bridge is more defined than most. That's really where it stands out for me, anyways. Yeah, he just fell in love with this woman, and actually the name of the film, Marianne of My Youth, is partially what inspired the name of the Harlock film, Arcadia of My Youth. Yeah, you just like, and that was in 1980 some odd. Yeah, 1980, I want to say, maybe 1982. Yeah, that's how long he was holding on to that film. It was such a big deal to him.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm sure. Like if they'd seen that one, he would be able to just go on about it forever. Which it's always interesting seeing what particular directors sort of or artists, creatives glom onto. Because I think that's mostly what that movie's known for in the West is its relationship to Leiji Matsumoto more than anything.
Wow. When you look at the sum of history, some of the things that were required to happen to bring about other events is kind of crazy sometimes. You know, you've got this French film from 1954, Marion of My Youth, and you also have Euro Disney was a big part in making this film happen. You see, in 1993, when Daft Punk was at Euro Disney, that's actually when they got their demo to the head of Soma Records, or someone who worked at Soma Records, and that ultimately led to the release of Homework. So without Euro Disney, this movie wouldn't have happened. So I guess Euro Disney wasn't a complete failure after all.
There you go. And it made an animated film that wasn't done by Disney. Even better. There we go. Yeah, just pure circumstance that led to all this, or just like a single film that so thoroughly influenced someone in such a way that everything sort of dominoed after the fact.
So what you're saying is that it's Euro Disney's fault that Daft Punk broke up.
In a way, yes.
I knew it.
It's like how it's your mother's fault that you die someday. Yes.
I knew it.
Any way we can blame Disney in some stretch of it, I'm down for that.
Yeah, exactly.
Fuck you, Disney.
Yeah, bagooms.
That's a sentiment we can all agree with.
No, but sort of getting back to the thesis, the film itself. One of the things that I do like, and it is sort of melancholic going back to it, but there is, with a film like this, there is always one more time. You could always just put it on again, or like a record, you just put it on. I mean, records they degrade eventually, but whatever. All of Daft Punk stuff is on CD. That is sort of a nice thing. I do like it because you could really, like, thematically, if you just put this film on loop, it always opens with one more time, or the end credits always one more time. So yeah, you could always have one more time with Interstella.
One more time.
God.
I would like to eventually have, for the first time, see this film where it doesn't look kind of bad. Apparently, the Secret Celluloid Society was screening this film, and some people have said that they were screening it on 35 millimeter. And then I think when you investigate that claim, they were actually just screening it in digital. But man, if I ever discovered that there was somehow a 35 millimeter print of this specific movie, I don't know how much I'd pay for it. When I heard about the Marilyn Monroe sex tape, I was less excited than hearing there might be a 35 millimeter print of Interstella 4-5. On God.
I'm sure there is. I mean, it had to have had, I'm confident it had some level of theatrical screening, despite being a digital film.
A digital film that premiered on Cartoon Network here in the States?
Yeah, but that's a good point. Well, I mean, digital animation for years was still, like, it's like the masters would have still been put to film. Like, there would at least be film masters of it. I'm relatively confident they wouldn't just destroy those. It is Toei. Oh, no. Made myself sad again.
So, Daft Punk is a band composed of Thomas Bangalter and Guy Manuel Diome Cristo. And they met when they were attending secondary school, right? They formed an indie rock band called Darlin', and in a critique that got called Daft Punky Trash, and so they formed Daft Punk. Their albums include Homework, 1997, Discovery 2001, Human After All 2004, and Random Access Memories 2013. They didn't make it to 5. They have a few movies behind their belt. They have DAFT, A Story of Dogs, Androids, Firemen, and Tomatoes. That came out in 2000. And a movie after this that is Electroma that came out in 2006. There's also a documentary about them that I think came out in 2015. In my opinion, Discovery is their best album. Is that disputed by anybody? Does anybody think that Discovery is not their best album?
No, Discovery owns.
About a week ago, I would have said Random Access Memories, but yeah, no, it's Discovery.
About a week ago, you would have been wrong.
I will admit when I'm wrong, and I was in fact wrong when I said that Random Access Memory, which is still a good album, don't get me wrong, but that's not their best album.
I actually like Homework, and the Tron Legacy soundtrack's pretty darn... No, I like Discovery. I would say it's their best album, even as someone who does quite enjoy Homework and even has more affection than most, I feel for Human After All. Yeah, Discovery is still probably their best, even to someone who likes all their studio albums and even some of their live stuff and that Tron thing, what they did.
That Tron Legacy score is still probably one of the best movie scores of the last decade.
What they did to Tron is a pretty good summary of what they did to Tron. I don't mean Daft Punk. I mean that whole company that made that what they did to Tron. Look how they massacred my boy.
One thing that bears making brief remarks about is I forgot Daft Punk was in this movie. How'd everyone feel rewatching this and seeing Daft Punk at the Golden Record show?
Oh, I still love them.
I just saw them and I was just like, oh, it's a nice little Stan Lee-esque cameo. I missed them already.
They put little words on the helmet. When the crescendos win the award, his helmet says "great" as he's clapping his hand.
And they do that. Their shoulders are all hunched, like they're kind of uncomfortable in their seats, like kind of a little bit too tight, but they're just happy to be there.
I still wish that this had been an animated series. I wish those two French bastards had made a cartoon show. Jackie Chan got one. Let's make the Adventures of Daft Punk.
It'd be good.
The Beatles had a cartoon in the 60s, and the Jackson 5 had a cartoon in, I think, the 70s.
They did.
Give Daft Punk, give them their own cartoon.
I feel like those are two very poor examples to use for why Daft Punk should have an animated series.
They were musicians. They were bands. That I felt it was an inappropriate comparison, but yeah, no. It's quality-wise, yeah, no, they're bad. As much as I have an affection for the Beatles cartoon.
Oh yeah, it's bad. It's funny bad though. I'll give you that one.
I don't need it to be great. I don't need it to be Gem and the Holograms, right? I just need it to exist.
I love when he kicks over the plant.
One thing I thought was an interesting contradiction was that this is a classic example of musicians making a movie about how the record industry is corrupt and backwards.
You know, that was actually something I wanted to mention, but rewatching this for the first time, and I want to say a couple of years or so, it's been a hot minute since I've seen it. This time around, I really began to notice that there's kind of an underlying message about exploitation in the music industry. I kind of picked it up a little bit. I don't know how much of it was intentional, but appropriation of other cultures in the music industry even. Did anybody else kind of pick up on that one a little bit?
I hadn't noticed it, but I can kind of see that.
I took a more sort of magical viewing of that it sort of glamorizes what musicians do in a way by making them these aliens that are turned into humans and then forced to work for these damn record executives, except for the good one, right? That musicians are sort of these they can be these fantastic otherworldly beings, and that if you take them down to earth and you force them into the music industry and becoming exhausted by the repetition of constantly doing live shows and signing stuff, that you're taking something really grandiose and cosmic and cool and you're bastardizing it. I could not in my head make the could not make the correlation with a modern interpretation of appropriating other cultures.
It might just be a stretch, but it was mostly just because I considered the fact that, oh yeah, these are aliens, and well, they're at one point literally whitewashed, but I don't know. It might just be a bit of a stretch.
No, I definitely get that with the idea of an alien culture that in theory would not be accepted, you make them, you clean them up, you make them more approachable to your particular audience by, in this case, making them into humans as opposed to extraterrestrials, and then have them perform their music. It's very, Elvis singing very black music kind of thing, and that's certainly there. I think I don't think it's super intentional, but that's actually an interesting read on it, and that's one I hadn't super considered when going in. I wonder, I do wonder how much of that was intentional, but I could definitely see it in terms of because that's always been an issue with the music industry, is stealing from usually black artists or borrowing heavily without credit from black artists. Like a lot of early rock and roll again has its roots in black artists or just straight up covers singing their songs, or even marketing black artists as white people, that sort of thing, if they were passing. But again, I think it's certainly, it's the kind of thing where it doesn't draw, if it is intended, it doesn't draw enough attention to itself to be particularly cogent, in the sense that this movie's kind of wacky fun times throughout. But again, but even then, I think any argument like what Austin was saying is like the messaging about the record industry kind of falls apart when it's like, oh, it's not because of the record industry, it's because of the evil guy who's making all the 5,555 gold records to make the world blow up or whatever. It's the kind of thing where if you think about it for more than 10 seconds, it's like, well, that doesn't really make sense in terms of the larger thing, but whatever, it works in the moment. Yeah. That's, I think, what's most important in this case.
Barrel's human outfit was the coolest.
It was. With the really short jorts and tank top with the leather gloves.
Yeah,
what a look.
Yeah,
he looks like kind of a dork on his homeworld a little bit.
But then he comes to Earth and he got that drip.
God, and he's super, like, he's ripped.
I know, dude's awesome.
Look that buff.
Look at that glow up.
For real.
God, what a king.
Are we talking about Shep?
Oh no, we're talking about Barrel.
Barrel.
Shep is also
okay. When Shep's ghost descended, I ascended. It was great.
Oh, I love how completely nude he grabs the Earl de Darkwood, just like putting him in a hug and giving a look to Stella, but he's just buck ass naked.
That'll do it.
What a play.
That's like I know actually some people comment on Shep being kind of a weirdo, or like his relationship with Stella. I'm curious if any of you have any thoughts on that too, like that sort of instant connection.
I mean, it did seem sort of weird that, like, he's got this obsession with his poster girl, and then he's somehow got this tracking system on her, and like just knows she's in danger with no other information there. I mean, that was kind of weird, but it's like, okay, cartoon logic.
This movie is interesting because it's the anti-perfect Blue, but he is perfect Blue,
Like, my reading on it was considering how, like, you had the security forces who were protecting them, and there is a sense that like Stella seems to like have an emotional reaction to seeing him, that there is some history, like even if they aren't dating, like they know each other in some capacity.
My dude drove a guitar.
The coolest goddamn ship I've ever seen in my life. You cannot convince me otherwise.
On another viewing, like, it's not super clearly established, but one does get a sense that maybe they know each other, and it's more than just this sort of pining after someone. Like maybe there was a missed connection somewhere, or maybe they knew each other when they were kids or something. Or at least that was my read on it, particularly after seeing Stella's reaction to him. There was a sense of recognition, which I might be reading too much into. And it's really not that important. Like, again, the film is very straightforward and a little bit goofy, but I know that seems to stand out to people sometimes, is his sort of obsession.
It might have been like, oh my God, you're the guy who drives the space guitar.
Yeah, true.
I know you.
Maybe the space guitar is their touring van. And that wasn't like planetary security. That was like their regular security, just like concert security.
I mean, the first time we see him, he's got like space vacuum and he's doing space vacuuming.
Yeah, there's a lot of character in that intro that I really appreciate for a series. Like, he, as cool as they make Shep at the end of it, he's depicted as sort of a silly guy at the introduction, which I appreciate.
Dude's a total fanboy too.
Yeah, just a goofus who really likes music. He really likes Daft Punk.
I don't know, man. If you're gonna be in space and you're gonna take the time to vacuum, I think that's what emphasized that he was a good guy to me. Like, he cares about dust in space.
Vacuum in the vacuum. But no, this has been the Interstella cast with Ethan,
Brandon,
Austin,
Joseph.
I'm Tim.
and this has been a train wreck. Take care. Bye.
Wah, wah,
Bye.
wah, ba-da-da-da-da.
I just slid my ticket across the table and I said, "Sorry guys, I gotta see about a girl."